Hi, I'm Karen Young from The Professional Adult, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit today about something that I'm seeing as a pretty large gap within diversity, equity, and inclusion. We hear a lot about the acquisition process, hiring people, sourcing the right folks, bringing in, all sorts of great talent, but we tend to forget retention. How do you keep the people that are already there? We learned from one study from the Kapoor Center that almost 48% of people of color leave due to dissatisfaction with their work environment or their job duties. That's almost 1 out of every 2 people. Pair that with how expensive it is to train a new employee, and that is a recipe for disaster. So what do you do about retention? One way to increase retention are to do stay interviews. What are stay interviews? They're good ways of finding out what drives your employees, what motivates your employees, and what keeps them coming back. This is especially important for your Black and Brown employees. So today we're going to talk about stay interviews, what they are, how to conduct one, and what you should do about them. So let's first talk about a stay interview. So a stay interview is an interview that happens between your manager and an employee to find out what their motivations are, what brings them to work every day. It's also a good place to find out what are things that they're no longer interested in or things that don't motivate them. Now, a stay interview is very different than an exit interview. An exit interview, by the time it happens, you're way too late. The employee is already 1 or maybe 2 feet out the door, and you're not going to really get a good sense of just what would keep your employee here. Some of the things that are covered in a stay interview are questions about what brings someone to work every day. What are things that the organization can do better? What are the things the organization can stop doing? And we'll go over some of those questions in a minute. So why are stay interviews even important? They help to uncover biases and issues in the workplace. You don't really know what's going on unless someone tells you, and a stay interview is a great way of figuring that out. They're also a good way of understanding your employees as people and not as resources to be moved around a pegboard. It also shows your employees that you value them and that you want them to help you improve the business, and that you as the business know that the way to do that is by looking at the employee as a whole person. So when do you do stay interviews? You could really do them at any time before an employee is ready to leave. But whenever you do them, they should be consistent across the board. I happen to like to recommend to my clients that doing stay interviews should happen at the halfway mark of any of your review cycles. For example, if you do yearly reviews, they should happen at the 6-month mark on the opposite side of that. So if you do reviews in December, make sure you do your stay interviews in June. It's also helpful to do stay interviews after the first 90 days. After you have 90 days, an employee has gotten a good sense of what the job entails, what the roles are required for the position, but also enough to know what's starting to work and what isn't starting to work. You also get the benefit of getting fresh eyes as part of that interview. So how does one do a stay interview? Well, a stay interview off the bat should be no more than an hour. You really don't need much longer than that to talk about kind of what drives an employee. Also, it should be just between the manager and the employee. This is not a panel discussion. But above anything else, make sure your employees actually feel safe enough to talk to you about these things. If your employees don't feel safe or don't have a good level of psychological safety, you're not going to get the true answers you want. You'll get platitudes, or you may not get anything at all. So first, make sure that you have that psychological safety. And we'll talk about psychological safety in another video. But once you've had that, make sure that you're also very clear and explicit about what you're going to cover in the stay interview, and stay on topic. Some of the questions that you can ask are things like, what do you look forward to when you come to work? What are some of the things that you just really don't want to do when you come to work? How do you like being recognized? What can we do to support you better? What should we stop doing? Do you feel fully utilized and seen in your current role? What would make your job more satisfying? And what is the one thing that you would tell someone else that's the best part of your job? All of those questions are things that will drive out what is interesting to your employee and what keeps them there in the seats, ready to go every day for work. So what do you do now that you have all of this information? Make sure that you're taking notes. But when you're taking notes, be sure to listen. And then share those notes with the employee to make sure you didn't miss anything. Then go ahead and add those notes to that person's file and integrate those things into their review. So if someone is motivated by, say, having more time off for their family, integrate that into their review as, hey, these are one of the things that we can work towards and why. And then finally, commit to anything that you promise in that interview. If you say, yes, the organization will look into this, then you need to make sure that you look into it. You can also use stay interviews as a data point for future changes. Look to see what the trends are. Are you now hearing more people talk about compensation in terms of stretch goals? Are they now talking more about money? Are they now talking about the ability to work more remote? What are the things that everyone is starting to look at, and then use that as part of your trending? So in closing, stay interviews are a simple and easy way of getting really great information from your employees, and also as a way of making sure your employees feel seen and heard. Comment below on what you would like to see as a stay interview, and let me know how things go for you. Again, this has been Karen Young from The Professional Adult. Y'all have a great day.